Alrighty, folks, we're going to have a detailed conversation about the most flexible and likely to become your favorite lending product ever. This is something that Mr. Stephen Dow and I affectionately call the 50-40-10. It anchors on a 90% CLTV loan. We will talk about that and more. But before we do, let's get the marketing thing out of the way.
Thank you, sir, for remembering again. Although I work very, very happily for Velocity Mortgage Capital, all the ideas and topics discussed on this channel are that of my own. So let's get it going.
So let's break it down for folks. Again, we've been talking about this on and off for the better part of a couple of years. I know a lot of people, including the lumberjack landlord, have leveraged the 50-40-10.
Yes.
Again, we'll talk about all the different
story.
configurations. But why don't you talk about, first off, what is a 90% CLTV loan? We're going to break it down into its basic parts.
Okay, so basically that represents the maximum allowed combined loan to value. That's what CLTV means. So in essence, we allow for secondary financing to come up behind our financing as far as the first position, usually up to a maximum of anywhere from 70 to 75%, depending upon property type and sometimes loan amount. Now, the 90% would then relate to the fact that if the seller, in most cases, in these transactions, usually in the case of a purchase, if the seller had enough equity and was willing to carry anywhere from a 15 to 20% second behind my 70 to 75% first, to a combined maximum loan to value of 90%, that would allow you, the buyer, to only have to come in with 10%. So that does give a lot of flexibility in a lot of situations where if you don't have the full 25 or 30% down, you might be able to negotiate where the seller can carry a small portion and still be able to maybe cash flow even from day one of putting 10% down. So it just depends. I mean, ideally we talk about that 50-40-10 because if we could split up the loan leverage in that percentage, that would allow me to offer you my lowest rates. And right now, I mean, I could be in the low 8s, almost under 8% on a 30-year fix at 50% LTV, no ratio.
Right.
So you
again,
that with
there's so much flexibility in the CLTV. Again, folks, what I want you to think about is, again, the total debt will be 90%. And for a lot of folks, this is a net new concept, right? Because essentially, or we are talking about a first and a second. There's a lot of folks that play in the conventional space, but like, hey, you can't do that. My conventional lender won't like that, or it just messes up the first. Velocity welcomes it because, again, in the 50-40-10, not only do you give the best rates, but Velocity clearly has the most security. That's why you give the best rates at a 50% LTV.
Agreed. So, and again, I think that's ideally for everybody to some degree. I mean, if the seller doesn't need all the proceeds from the sale of his property, whereas on that 50-40-10, he gets a little bit of benefit from a lower capital gains hit initially at only 60% of his money instead of 100%, and then the passive income on that remaining 40% will help to offset the remaining capital gains on that same 40%. So really, in the end, they still get to keep more of their money. It just gets delayed a little bit, at least from my perspective. But it allows for a lot of different advantages for either party. It just depends on what their scope of need is, either immediately or down the road. And so then you can kind of structure how long of a note that the seller might need to carry, or the buyer might need it to, just to kind of get the property in a position where maybe increase rents and restabilize it and such. So depends on the scenario, but there's a lot of different levers to pull depending upon the situation. So I think that's where my product really shines best. We're very accommodating in a lot of ways, so it makes it for a higher probability of getting loans to the finish line, even though we start off a little rough, or I should say we start off okay assuming things, and then along the way things just start to pop up. I mean, many of the past ORAT people I've talked to that I've helped, they'll tell you it started off one way and it just ended up another way, but we were able to still accommodate with all the ups and downs and stuff like that. So
yeah, again, the beauty of a 50-40-10 or the 90% CLTV product is, again, we're talking about having a first and a second, but also it can't be missed that 10 part. You're coming into potentially a very large asset. Again, what is the maximum size out there? I'm guessing you don't do $100 million deals.
No. I mean, I wouldn't mind it. Just get paid a little bit more, but no, that's not our space. Our wheelhouse is what they would consider small balance commercial, basically 5 million and under. On the commercial side, on the residential side.
Now, just so I'm clear on that. So 5 million, that's the loan amount. So in theory, if we did a 50-40-10, the asset could be about 5.5 million, right? 10%
Correct.
down takes
Something
you
like
to
that. Yes. Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So again, let's just realize what we have. Again, a lot of the people that watch this, myself included, we're not going to be doing a $5 million deal.
No.
But again, I want you to realize what's out there. You can get
Mhm.
into a large asset, which in my world could be 40 or 50 units with 10% down. And
Right.
then you flip that over. And if you do it right, you can actually have 30-year money at a blended interest rate that's
Yep.
below
Yep.
market.
Yep.
It's just this blows me away that you could take a 50% first, and I'm just going to use rough math at 8.
Uh-huh.
Then you could get a 40% second at say 2.
Right.
Gives you a blended interest rate, I don't know, 5.5 or something, 5.75.
Right.
This
But at
is
90% leverage.
and at 90. I mean, it's just it hurts my head how flexible this is.
Right. It's just, again, just having to do the work and then understanding, the dynamics of your specific, scenario with the seller and what their needs are, and then kind of just figuring that stuff out. Because, if you just crunch the numbers to where if the seller understands not to get too aggressive on that, negotiation with the seller, with the second, they would see that if the property can cash flow from day one, if they're not too, greedy, maybe that's the wrong word for, with the seller, but if they can understand the big picture, if it can cash flow from day one, now with the seller being in second position, they're less likely not to get paid. So it's a pretty strong position if you can allow it to be so, right? If you get your advantage of selling now, maybe at your price or even maybe a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
But you got to give the buyer their terms. It's a give and take. But if you can do that, then I think really everybody wins. If you truly understand what I'm trying to achieve with what I'm doing here, which is sell my property, sell it now, and sell it on price, or even sell it at more. But then you got to understand what the buyer truly needs, and then maybe you can meet them halfway with that. Like, okay, I'll give you your terms. I may not make a lot on the second that I'm carrying, but I'm getting my price, and I'm saving more money because I'm not getting capital gains hit.
Yeah. Especially in a world where demand falls off a cliff, right? If we truly are heading for a world where commercial real estate starts to suck wind, having a conversation about, hey, you're gonna get more of your money. It's just going to be, some of it's going to be delayed. These are going to be multiple conversations. And again, I think you actually brought up the key. We'll do this in the next video, but you brought up the key. You got to communicate with the seller up front. Hey, at the end of the day, I want to hold this asset forever.
Yep.
And we could do this a couple of different ways. We can work out a number where you're cashed out. It'll be lower.
Right.
Or we work out a deal where you carry some paper for a defined time frame for 5 years, 10 years, shoot 30 years, whatever that's right for the seller. And then, you got to work on the terms, right? Because again, I need the cash flows. The asset needs to be secure. I can't be bleeding every month and lose the property. That's not what you want, right, Mr. Seller?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be motivated to buy if that's the case. It's like not even alligator arms, just like inverse arm from day one. I'm amputated from day one. Like, what are you talking about, bro? So, agreed.
Again, we talk about the 50, 40, 10, but it really anchors on that 90%. You have done deals like you could do a 70, 20, 10.
And right. I've done 65, 15, 10. I did a 42, 48, 10.
Oh, there you go. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the only stipulations is pretty much my minimum requirement of my first mortgage should be around 75,000, and your max combined loan to value is 90%. And so that's like basically buyer's got to put down minimum 10% down. I got to be at least minimum 75,000. You can figure out the rest just as long as it doesn't surpass 90%. That's like a huge, you know what I mean? So but in most cases, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of times sellers, when they're offering seller financing, they want to prefer to be in first position, but at a higher rate, so then it's like, well, hey, if you don't need to carry as much, maybe you can take a lower rate, but you need to be in second position, and here's why, boom. But it takes a really, good, meaningful conversation. Sometimes getting through the, I wouldn't call them the gatekeeper, but the seller's agent.
For sure.
It's sometimes difficult too, because they may not understand the concept as well to really, effectively, communicate to the seller to where they'll understand it. So it's a work in progress, but man, when you can get it done, it's fun. It is fun for me, at least, because obviously, I get to participate, I get paid a little bit, but you could see how like everybody involved gets what they want. You know what I mean? It's Lumberjack Landlord. It was just fantastic.
Yeah. It's just a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
It's multiple conversations. You also have the seller also has to trust you clearly, right? They're betting on you for 40%. But if somebody had a deal or an opportunity, they just wanted to poke around or even ask more questions, what do they do?
Email again to
the other way.
Yep.
There you go. Yep.
Yep.
Right there.
Wait. Yep, there it is. To email to sdow@velocitymortgage.com. In the subject line, please put the acronym ORAAT to make it past the firewall. Body of the email, maybe a brief description, what you're looking for. At least city and state to make sure I can lend there. Address would be great. Mid-FICO score, best phone number to reach you at. Typically 24, 40 hours, I'll be in touch.
You're amazing, man. Again, I think this is going to be a big opportunity. I think, again, as Ken McElroy in video number 1 talked about, the Class A is trading, right? He got an asset from 150 down to sub 100. I think that's all coming to Class B and Class C. Folks, figure it out. You got a great tool to use. 50, 40, 10 Velocity Mortgage. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.